stunning looks than swift.
Here comes the World Cup, the crowning jewel of our sport, the 13th edition of what is the one and only ICC Men's Cricket World Cup. England and New Zealand arguably played the greatest ever World Cup final, the greatest ever ODI 4 years ago. Doesn't matter what's happened in between in a different world. Effectively, we start from there. And England and New Zealand will kick us off at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad in just over 40 minutes from now. It's a very warm welcome to you on Maruti Suzuki Arena Presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday. And it's a welcome back to Anil Kumble. World Cup has a different feel to it, but before I get a comment from Anil, let me also say hello to Dale Steyn. And Anil, we can welcome him all over again on our live show.
Yeah, absolutely. And to welcome him, I've matched the jacket as well. So just so that we look similar.
It's been what, 16 years since your last World Cup appearance? 8 since yours? You two haven't aged a day, have you?
It's been 8 years already.
Has it?
Since I got hit for that 6. Terrible. I still haven't recovered.
I can imagine. But that is it. When you say that 6, it comes to memory. That is the uniqueness of the World Cup, that we remember World Cup cricket. It's still relevant, even today when we have questions on the future of the format, isn't it, Dale?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a period of your game where you're quite emotionally attached to the game. And then there's a period where you just really enjoy cricket, I suppose. You know, in the latter stages of my cricketing career, I really enjoyed games, even though we lost games. I was like, I was part of that. You know, that was an amazing game to be a part of. Even though Mitchell Johnson cleaned us up and almost killed us, or we got knocked out of semi-final World Cups, you know, it was just great to be part of those games.
I mean, we're speaking, I can say it, I'm speaking to 2 all-time greats. And yet, I'm sure the World Cup has its own special moment. It doesn't perhaps happen to a number of great players that you win a World Cup, but that Dale talks about, even the experience of having played and losing games in World Cups, it can be no greater feeling in this format, I guess.
Yeah, it is something that every cricketer looks forward to, being a part of that World Cup squad and hopefully hold the trophy at the end of the World Cup. But, you know, in my case, it didn't happen. But like Dale mentioned, I mean, you remember those World Cups, good or bad. Those experiences, and just being a part of a World Cup squad and being a part of a tournament, world event, is something very special, because you know, it comes only once in 4 years, and then there's no way that the same team would participate in the next World Cup. So it's one lifetime opportunity for all those players who are going to be participating as well.
We also stand at a very interesting time with the fate of the format at stake, and this World Cup. Osman Samiuddin wrote a lovely preview to the piece, illustrating how this generation of players playing this World Cup, Anil, grew up watching ODI cricket. Perhaps 4 years from now in South Africa and Zimbabwe and Namibia, we'll have a very different set of players. Do you sense that, having coached at the T20 circuit too, that this format still means as much to a larger percentage of current active cricketers, or could this very well be the last World Cup that is such a big deal?
I think World Cups will happen, at least for the next 2 cycles. I'm hoping that the one-day International World Cup remains, because this certainly helps. You know, it's not just a T20 format. You know, yes, that's more. It's a mixture of your Test and T20 is what you see in a ODI. There's still some element of giving respect to the bowler at the start, if there's a little bit of something in it for the bowlers, and that's something that you want to see in a match. But yes, the T20 tournaments are certainly challenging. The ODI format, this probably is the most vulnerable. We all spoke about Test cricket being challenged, yes, in terms of people coming into the stadium and watching, but the following of Test cricket has increased, I'm sure, over the last few years with the kind of cricket that's being played.
I guess the following of some Test cricket would have increased between, say, 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the 3 or 4 main nations who are going to be well watched for you know, in terms of test match cricket. But in ODI cricket, yes, this probably is vulnerable. But having said that, the most challenging would be the bilateral series, ODI bilateral series going forward. The World Cups, I'm sure, I'm hoping that the next cycle will have the ODI format. T20 will certainly be well watched, because it's once in 2 years and more teams participate, and it's a shorter format, but ODI will have its challenges.
I mean, I guess the stage that tournaments like the IPL provide a lot of younger players, you almost feel like when you win the IPL, it's as good as winning a World Cup. At least the emotional, physical investment that you put in and the celebration around it, the stakes that the IPL tends to have, but does the active cricket almost feel the same level of emotion that someone like you and the generations before you felt when they played World Cup cricket?
Oh yeah, I thought World Cup cricket was the biggest thing ever, you know, especially 50 over World Cup cricket, because it feels like kind of like the Olympics in a way. It comes around once every 4 years or whatever it is, whereas a 2020 or an IPL seems to be happening every year, you know. So if you get knocked out of an IPL, don't worry about it, you know, there's another one next year, or there's another 1,000 leagues happening this year that you can potentially go and win a trophy at and, you know, take your Instagram posts or make your family happy. But when it comes to like 50 over World Cup, you might not get that chance again, you know. Anrich Nokia, I just think about a guy like him, he's missed out on 2 World Cups now, and because the next one is still 4 years time away, he might never play another one, you know. So that's where the weight comes in it, you know. It just means that there's weight in terms of like how much it feels to you, but also weight in terms of like you have to wait a long time again, you know. So 50 over World Cup for me really meant everything, and the other ones obviously they mean a lot, you know. To be a world champion and win an IPL or win a T20 World Cup is a big deal, but that 50 over World Cup feels like it's just got a little bit, to me personally, felt like it had a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, this, whatever your thoughts on the future of the format, it can't help but think we're excited about this World Cup. It's back in India, and India set the trend of hosts winning it. Let's see if that does continue. But England, New Zealand, they have a part to play in this World Cup, and England have had such a big part to play in the revolution and the evolution of the ODI format. Joss Butler now almost is embarrassed when he's asked about it. But as we look at breaking down the last, say, 4 to 8 years of ODI cricket, it's very hard sometimes to put numbers in perspective, especially with what ODI cricket has had to deal with in the last 4 years. Primarily, the game's been focused on 2 T20 World Cups, 2 World Test Championships. There was the pandemic as well. But scoring rates, as we tend to look at how teams go about changing the way to keep up with a team like England, if we can call it that, after the revolution that happened in 2015. Funny enough, India seemed to be playing at a better tempo, so too South Africa, consistent Australia. England, there's a slight drop. I don't know if I can even call that a drop. We must be careful when we pick out numbers in the last 4 years. If I ask you two to tell me all the ODIs you remember in the last 4 years, I don't know which one, I don't know how well you'll answer. But is this the same England team with the same England threat as 4 years back, Anil?
I think the rules also have changed. I mean, if you look back at 2011 to 15, there was that power play options where 5 overs you could control as a batting unit versus a bowling unit when you could take those power plays. And then there was restriction on between 41 to 50 as well, with the amount of fielders that you could potentially have outside the ring. So all that has certainly caused the change that you can see.
Yeah, I mean, especially when the first column and the last.
Yes.
Between 11-15 and 19-23, you could see teams clearly had to up it.
Yes, they have. And that's one of the reasons why those changes happened as well, because everyone felt that between that 11 or 15, initially it was 15, that 16 to the 40th over, it just was too boring, and they wanted to see a lot more boundaries, and spinners, of course, got affected with that. But having said that, yes, England certainly have changed the kind of model that you would want, or a template that you would want to pick your playing 11, because they've just filled with all-rounders. They have, 8 options, bowling options, and then perhaps number 11 bats as well. So that's the kind of template that they have been able to change. And when you play England, any team that's playing England are aware that they'll come hard from ball 1, and that itself can, take some teams off, and you won't be able to catch up. So you're constantly looking at saying, okay, 6 runs an over is a given, and as a bowler, that can become a defensive option when you're running in and bowling into an English batsman.
I feel like I'm digressing for a bit, but I feel so bad. Given I have 2 great bowlers with me, and we have a lot of them, every rule change is essentially designed to take away when the bowler is doing well. Oh, they're not scoring fast enough. Let's do something so they score faster, right?
No, it was quite a challenge. I mean, I was head of the cricket committee, and as a bowler, it was quite a challenge to bring that additional fielder in between the 41 to 50 overs. In fact, we wanted to bring back the reverse swing, which is totally gone. When we played, it was one ball, and then after the 40th over, going into bat, Wasim Akram or Waqar Yunus swinging.
Well, you know a thing or two about that subject, Dale? Reverse swing, never.
Like once or twice managed to get the ball the reverse in my career. But I mean, it's interesting. I was just looking at those stats, and you see how England certainly led the way in like changing the things. You can see how they jumped a whole run, essentially. But in my mind, when I'm looking at those numbers, they're not significantly massive compared to some of the other teams that are chasing them in India and South Africa, just behind 2 and 3 there. But I look at the way that South Africa bat, because I'm South African, I pay a lot of focus on them. It's not like they've shot the lights out of the world, and yet they're right there. They're right there just behind England, So although England had made that change originally, teams are catching up. So I applaud England on making that change and scoring at a quicker rate. But it's funny how we don't talk about India and South Africa the same way we speak about England, although they're right there. They're not far behind.
I want to show you some numbers, because the thought of this conversation that we've had on teams will go hard. This could be one of the highest scoring World Cups, etc., etc. Let's just look at 300 plus totals in ODI cricket. Again, in the last 4 years, it is tricky to put in perspective, because you've had different teams playing. Rohit Sharma may not have played every ODI series, so too can be said of a number of top players from around the world. But while India have certainly had a higher percentage of 300 plus totals, this is batting first since that 2015 World Cup. England seems to be a bit of a drop. Can anyone explain that, or shall we not get too much into it, given the poor value of recall cricket when it comes to ODI cricket last few years?
Number of games, maybe? I saw something about the number of games. I think England had played like 43, and again, I was looking at South Africa. I think South Africa had only played 40, whereas the previous was like 70 or something like that. So I suppose those numbers, and then the players that you're playing and blooding, giving an opportunity to play, that may play a role. But the mindset for me is still the biggest thing.
I guess the question, Anil, is we thought we would see 350, 370, 380 even at the last World Cup. It turned out to be a bit of a retro World Cup then, where 230s, 240s became good scores, including in knockout games. So what kind of World Cup are you expecting, or are we expecting this time? What kind of World Cup will this be?
I mean, we are playing in many venues, so each venue has its own character. The surface will tend to change as the tournament progresses, and I'm sure the spinners will start coming into play towards the second half of the tournament. There could be some rain as well. We have seen that in the warm-ups, so that could potentially be something that teams would have to keep an eye on. But having said that, India, generally you would get a high-scoring venue in most centres. We have seen even in the warm-up games at Hyderabad, teams have chased down 350. I know it's a warm-up game. You have plenty of batting, but still, 350 was the minimum that you had to score. So 300 plus we will get, but very difficult to get those blowouts. I mean, Lucknow is a venue where we don't know what to expect. So that's something that could be the only unexpected sort of a pitch, which until the first match, we don't know what's going to happen there.
I guess it's fair to say this part of the world, our part of the world, is still the best to score runs. So now that we look at a combination of everyone upping their ODI game versus the best part of the world, cricketing world, to get runs, are we going to see that kind of World Cup that we thought we might get in 2019, but we didn't? Do you expect this to be one of those crazy World Cups with lots of runs?
Yeah, I do. But again, like Anil was saying, like each ground has a different flavour to it in a different way, and if there's a bit of rain, who knows? But certainly teams are looking to score that 300 plus kind of score. I think we will see more runs now than we saw in 2019, certainly.
All right. Trust the poor South African man to bring up the rain at the start of the World Cup. Stop it now, Dale Steyn. We don't want that coming into any of our calculations. But this is a great time to also tell you what we've got in store for you for the next month and a half or so. Dale Steyn, Anil Kumble will be with us. There'll be a number of other fine voices to give you the sharpest insight and analysis right here on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday. So let's have a look at what we've got.
My prediction for the semi-finals is Australia, India, England, and I think South Africa will scrape in there.
India, Australia, England, and between New Zealand and South Africa.
India, lock in. England, Pakistan, and of course New Zealand. So Australia to miss out.
Well, I think India, the obvious one. I think Australia will be there as well. England and also South Africa.
South Africa, India, Australia, and England, in no particular order.
India, England, South Africa, and Pakistan.
I think it's going to be India, Australia, dare I say it, maybe South Africa and England.
My prediction for the semi-final will be India, England, Pakistan, and New Zealand.
I think it's going to be exactly the same as last time. I think India's going to play New Zealand and Australia's going to play England.
India, England, Australia for the fourth place, either New Zealand or Sri Lanka.
3 go straight up, India, England and Australia. My heart wants to say Pakistan, but I think my mind is telling me it'll be a close fight between South Africa and New Zealand for top 4.
Well, for me, it's going to be India, Australia, England and New Zealand.
I'm going to go Rohit Sharma. Has to really be an opener or a number 3.
Well, I'm going to actually go with Steve Smith.
Devon Conway.
Johnny Bairstow or Virat Kohli.
Rohit Sharma or a Devon Conway.
Well, I think it's 2 Indians. It's Shubman Gill or Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli.
Shubman Gill.
Mark Wood or Mitchell Starc.
Shaheen Shah Afridi. Matt Henry, New Zealand.
Trent Bolt. Mitchell Starc.
Kuldeep Yadav.
Jasprit Bumrah.
Could be Bumrah, yeah.
Highest score in ODIs. I don't think it's going to happen, but if the team's going to do it, it'll most likely be England to score 500.
I think it will be the most runs. Virat Kohli will break Sachin Tendulkar's 673 in 2002-03.
I think we'll see the highest team total in World Cup history.
Certainly the most number of sixes in a World Cup.
500 will be passed in an ODI.
Number of 300 plus scores or even run chases for that matter.
Most amount of Superman catches by Glenn Phillips.
What I'd like to see none, and I hope it remains that way. I would have a feeling that we might see 1.
0 non-strikers are going to be run-outs backing up this World Cup.
I really hope none as well.
The way things are going, either minimum 2 or 3.
4.
I don't think anyone's going to be game enough to do it this World Cup, so I think we're not going to see any, which is a good thing.
I think there'll be 1, and then the rest of the competition will be on notice.
Well, I hope there's going to be none.
Let's go 2.
A late pickup from South Africa, Gerald Coetzee. If he plays, I think will be dynamic. There's not many young players on show, but I think Sam Curran will be the one that stands out.
Well, other than Will Young, I think it's going to be Shubman Gill.
I think Shubman Gill is the obvious one for me.
Shubman Gill.
MVP to me would be the all-rounders. So Hardik Pandya or a Moeen Ali.
Hardik Pandya.
Josh Butler, and I think close in again with Shubman Gill, probably one of those 2.
Sam Curran or Hardik Pandya.
Or Devon Conway.
Mark Wood or Virat Kohli.
Shubman Gill.
If India win it and Shubman Gill's the leading run scorer, then that could take the cake.
I think the Pacers will win more games of cricket because they'll get more opportunities, being presented to them by their captains.
Coming from Pakistan, pace is pace, yeah.
Look, I'm a pace bowler, so I love pace bowlers, but I'm thinking the spinners will have the biggest talk.
For me, spinners, it's going to be an important one for the spinners in the middle overs.
Pacers definitely, and mainly left arm quicks.
I think Pacers will have a bigger say.
Extreme pace, I think, will be key in this tournament.
Spin to win for me. I think spin's going to dominate again.
All right, there you've had it, the assortment of analysis that will come our way in the names that you saw and some of their pre-tournament thoughts. Notice a pattern there. I think we've gone a bit light on the batting in our lineup. I don't think it's a bad thing. Yeah? Bowlers tend to be more more, let's just say, truer and insightful when it comes to these kind of shows?
More analytical.
More?
Analytical.
More analytical. They've had it harder, haven't they, all their lives. Right, let's focus our attention to match number 1 of the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup. And the toss has taken place in Ahmedabad, and New Zealand will bowl first. So England are going to bat, and England are going to be without Ben Stokes, the man that set up the 2019 final, etched his name into, well, cricketing folklore for the way it turned out. But Jos Buttler's side will not have him for now. We're going to have a World Cup debut for Harry Brook, who only just found his way into the squad with a late decision taken by England. But we're excited to see what he has to offer. Liam Livingstone, Moeen Ali, Sam Curran and Chris Woakes ensure that England bat till 9, which is Anil Kumble's point. Adil Rashid plays. Some chat on whether England might have gone all-out seam with just Moeen and Livingstone as part-time spin, but they've preferred their front-line leggy, and of course we're all waiting to see Mark Wood. Bairstow and David Malan along with Joe Root at the top. Let's get a reaction on that. No Ben Stokes, Anil, but as we look at that team, that still looks like quite a formidable England side, even without a player like Stokes.
Oh yes, that's a very formidable England side. All options covered. You have plenty of bowling options, batting deep, and yes, David Malan has opened the batting for them in the absence of course, Jason Roy is not a part of this World Cup. Bairstow has been doing well at the top since he's come back from injury, so it's a very formidable batting lineup. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit surprised that New Zealand won the toss and decided to field.
Why is that?
No, because I thought, you know, the way to beat England generally would be to bat first, score 300 plus if it's a good surface, and then put pressure because they'll come hard. You pick up a few wickets early. Then, you know, are you still game enough to go hard in those middle overs with that batting lineup?
Thoughts on the decision of the toss? We have seen teams chase comfortably in the warm-up games, but Anil's point on how to beat England, perhaps?
Yeah, just interesting. I mean, I don't know what the pitch looks like, so it would be interesting to hear what that's all about. But, you know, who knows? Maybe New Zealand is thinking first game of the World Cup. Let's get a bowl in. Let's try and knock a couple over. There could be some jitters out there. As a unit, let's get all 11 out onto the park and try and really attack England from that perspective. But generally in India, you know, you want to bat first. You want to utilize those good batting conditions, put up a big score, and that's what England like to do. And then let your spinners come into the game a little bit later. But an interesting decision to bowl first, and we'll see how it plays off for them.
Unless there's plenty of dew and they want their two spinners to sort of have that main middle overs bowling at the English batters, because, you know, Ishodi and Santner will need a dry ball, because you know, if they're defending a target, then that's a challenge as well.
Maybe they just want to do something different from Lords in 2019, just change it up, perhaps. All right. There is a story here for Harry Brook, though. Before I go to the New Zealand team, I'll come to that in a second. And I'm glad I've got you on today, Dale, because you would have spent some time with someone like Harry Brook in what was a difficult initiation into a high-pressure tournament like the IPL. Still, the jury's out on whether Brook is the same threat in ODI cricket, even though he seems to have busted in not just T20, but very good start to his Test career too. What can we expect from Harry Brook?
Well, I suppose he's just kind of slipping into where Ben Stokes would be. So I suppose he can also just fly under the radar with all those other greats that are all around him right now. But he's a superb player. You know, I worked with him during the IPL, and although he probably didn't have the IPL scores that he wanted to, that one score alone suggested what type of player he is. And he fits right into the mold of what England want their batters to do. He's aggressive. He takes the bowlers on. He's a young guy, so he's going to lead that kind of thinking and that kind of batting to go forward for years to come. And then he's surrounded by all those other guys like Joe Root and, you know, Butler and them that are around him that can support him through his innings. So he is a fantastic player. And I don't think England are going to miss out on Ben Stokes too much today, because they've got so many guys that can do what Ben does. But Harry Brook is an X-factor player. Yeah,
do you sense he is one of those young overseas players where they're better off in their national side, and sometimes the IPL, if it comes too soon, especially with the price tag, tends to have its effect?
Yeah, and also a young player like Harry Brook would prefer to be in this England setup where he has the expertise and the experience of a Bairstow, Joe Root and a Butler in that mix in the top order, and just goes there and then plays his aggressive game. I am sure that's one of the reasons why he is in this World Cup squad, although it was in the last minute that he made it. But, you know, yes, you know, in this kind of a setup, he can just go and express himself, just go and bat. freely against New Zealand bowlers, and the wicket generally is a good surface in Ahmedabad.
Yeah, and well, he's going to be knowing what England need to get. They're of course going to have to chase after the toss was won, and New Zealand are going to bowl first. Let's have a look at the team. I was just quickly making sure that I don't have to say Kane Williamson had won the toss. Unfortunately, no Kane Williamson. So it is going to be Tom Latham to lead and take the gloves for this team, which also has a bit of an injury concern round the squad. Tim Southee hasn't fully recovered from what was what he described as a tender thumb a few days back. There's also no Lockie Ferguson, who has a bit of a niggle. So they have Rachin Ravindra in there. Mark Chapman gets picked as well in, again, what looks like a pretty deep batting order. If you list someone like Mitchell Santner at number 9, that's not a bad batting unit, but that's how they shape up. So no Lockie Ferguson, Dale. They're already missing Southee. They're already missing Williamson. How does that New Zealand 11 look to you?
It looks good. Everybody, they've got a lot of bowling options again. James Neesham can bowl. Daryl Mitchell can bowl a couple overs. Some good spin options. Glenn Phillips has opted not to take the gloves of late and has worked real hard on his off spin. But Matt Henry, I watched Matt Henry and Trent bowl the other night in Trivandrum, and they were a handful. And that wicket obviously offered a little bit. There was some rain around and the pitch was under covers for a couple of days. But New Zealand made things very difficult for South Africa to score runs. And again, you know, haven't seen what the pitch looks like out there today, but if there is something in it, those two guys can certainly expose those conditions. I've actually tipped Trent Boult to be the leading wicket taker. And I love the way, I've mentioned this a few times, but I love the way that Kane uses him. And although Kane's not there today, he really gets Boult to bowl extended periods. So if there's going to be some swing, if there's going to be some movement, Trent's going to bowl a long 5, maybe even 6 over opening spell, which allows him to try and take a couple wickets and put pressure on him.
Do you sense, before I come to Anil on that, do you sense that the ball is swinging more now than it did, say, a few years ago? Are we expecting that to happen even in India in this World Cup? Suddenly it looks like it's not just that 1 or 2 overs. There's a good period of 8, 9 overs, or in the Asia Cup too, where bowlers are getting the ball to swing.
Yeah, I want to speak to the guy that made the balls. The balls weren't swinging when I was playing in the back end. In the early stages, they were swinging. No, but you know, with 2 new balls from either side, yes, you know, the ball's going to swing a little bit longer, I suppose. But maybe there's something in the leather. I'm not too sure. But you know, the ball has been swinging a lot of late. The seamers are the guys that kind of have been in the focus. And a couple of years ago, not so much. So maybe it's something to do with the balls.
All right, let's go back to that New Zealand team. Anil, Rachin Ravindra, perhaps listed at number 3.
Yeah, he did bat up the order in the warm-up games. Got a 90. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just experimenting and pushing him, taking that role of Kane Williamson. It's not easy to fill his shoes, but as a youngster, he's done well. He bowls well. He did well in that Test series against India.
Yes, absolutely.
So he has the temperament, and he has shown that in the opportunities that he's got.
All right, we teased this in our recorded preview to this game yesterday, but perhaps we could just go into a more wholesome discussion now on England's ability to dominate the middle overs. It's essentially the template that's worked towards their success, and a lot of other teams are now following it and trying to catch up and beat them at their game. But why do England succeed in the middle overs? How do they manage to play them better than others, and how do teams counter what they can expect now from the English side when they bat in the middle overs? That's a discussion we'll have with Anil Kumble and Dale Steyn for the next few minutes. Let's just have a look, gentlemen. Highest run rates overs 11 to 14 ODIs last couple of years. England right up there, no surprises, 6.23. Go for boundaries more often by and large than any other team. South Africa in second place, which is nice to see, the kind of form that David Miller, Heinrich Klaassen have shown in the middle order for South Africa. India getting there at 5.77. I think it'll be an improvement from previous years. Let's just talk about what it takes to master the art of playing the right gears in the middle overs, how you can dominate them. Anil?
I think what England have certainly showed is the lineup and the template that we discussed earlier as well in terms of their approach to batting those middle overs. They've chosen players whose natural instinct is to hit boundaries, and then if it requires to manage the change of gear, so to speak, rather than the other way around. And that's one of the reasons they've been able to hit those so many boundaries. And of course the restriction in those 11 to 40 overs as well, with spinners having one less fielder outside of that ring. So that certainly puts pressure on the bowlers. eventually giving away those loose deliveries for the batsman to cash in. And that's one of the reasons why the English batters, if you look at their middle order, everyone's probably their approach is to say, okay, first ball, can I hit a 6? And that's the kind of belief that they have, and that's the kind of template that they have built. And teams have different ways of getting to that 300 or 350 score, but England have chosen the boundary option rather than the single and working around that, keeping wickets intact. That's not how they play. So that's the change that you see.
Yeah, do you sense that they were the first to say, we need a boundary on over even 11 to 40?
Yeah, I don't think they were the first team to say that. I think the West Indies may have been the first team. They, in 2020 cricket, they certainly had that kind of thinking, you know, whereas they didn't worry about, they worried about how many boundaries they could get. I remember talking to them and they were thinking if they hit X amount of boundaries, they get to a certain score. And I know that's a particular way in which Heinrich Klaasen looks to think about it. He thinks that if he faces 10 balls, if he gets 2 or 3 boundaries out of that, his strike rate will be X or whatever it is. David Miller from South Africa has certainly developed his game by playing a lot more in India here, that he takes on spinners now in the middle overs. He doesn't just knock them around or try and look for ones, he actually hits 6s and 4s, which has increased their economy rate or run rates. And then a guy like Liam Livingstone, he walks up, if it's in his arc, first ball, he's going to hit you out the ground. So there are players that are just, that's their mindset now. Heinrich Klaasen, Liam Livingstone, David Miller have upped their game, and they've probably averaged, I don't know the numbers, but they've probably averaged the highest for their countries in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's why we're seeing those numbers so high.
Yeah, so I guess the key word you used is mindset. It seems like this is a generation of batters that is more equipped to doing it. If you ask, say, for lack of a better example, but more an older batter, more who's grown up playing ODI cricket, a Virat Kohli, or to a degree somebody like Joe Root, it seems like if you ask them to play the boundary game between 22 and 38, it's not as easy.
It doesn't come naturally to them. Whereas the template that England has built has sort of picked players where it comes naturally to them. And the other factor that certainly has made this happen is the restriction of the fielding as well. And as a spinner, you always had a long off, long on, a deep mid wicket, a deep square leg, and a deep point, bowling at a right-hander. But now one of those fielders have to be inside, which means that you have options to go over that infield, and you take those options, and that's one of the reasons why you see a lot more batters.
So the conditions have played a role in making this achievable or easier.
Absolutely.
You would think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we get so many balls now also that when you go to practice, guys are losing balls because that's what they do. They go out to the middle and they literally practice hitting 6s and 4s. And then I have to go to the manager afterwards and say, sorry, we lost 30 balls today. And he says, do you know how much a ball costs? And I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, you want to win the IPL, this is what guys are going to do.
Let me rewind, let me just get that in my head. Dale Steyn has to go tell the manager that we've lost enough balls.
Yeah, I have Murali, who's in our team, and he's the biggest ball hog I've ever met in my life. I want to give the guys more balls, and Murali is always counting them like this. So, yeah, tough school.
Murali counts wickets.
I'm shocked. I can't believe it. Could I send a couple of admin people in over to the Sunrisers at some point? My goodness. All right. But when we talk about Murali, we talk about the point that Dale Steyn makes about the ability to play spin, and that has also been essential in countering what we thought was a bit of a revolution of wrist spin bowling in the last World Cup, where if you had a good wrist spinner, that's the way to deceive a batter. Let's just have a look at England's ability to play spin. And I guess this is something that also comes with the kind of culture or the kind of players that they're looking for, Anil. Against spin in ODIs post the 2019 World Cup, Butler at an average of 45, Malan 75. Moeen, he's a better player of spin than those numbers necessarily suggest. But they also seem to find batters that do not have problems against spin. Yeah,
and the other reason being, what I just mentioned, where, as a spinner, there's a lot more pressure now to bowl good areas. I mean, 6 balls in good areas where it's not easy with a restriction of one fielder not having that under your armory. So that's one of the reasons why you see such wonderful scores. And of course, even the strike rate in one-day cricket is really good. And Joss Butler and David Malan is a good player. I mean, David Malan, left-hander, being a left-hand and right-hand, it gets that much more tougher when a left-hander is at the crease as well for a spinner in those restrictive areas.
Yeah, I think there's a nice assortment of left and right when it comes to England. They're missing Stokes today, and Brooke replaces him. As an opposition, though, there is a chance. They can also be dismissed for 245 in 38 overs, so
Yep.
250, 260.
Yep, I mean, we've spoken about that. I think England won't slow down the way that they play. They won't change. I heard somebody, Josh Butler, last night when they said, how do you feel about defending the World Cup? He said, defending is not a word we speak about in our dressing room. He says, we want to attack all the time. So it wouldn't surprise me if England get bowled out in the 42nd or 43rd over, but they score 310, 320 or 300 odd runs, you know. That is just going to be their mindset for this World Cup. And based on the playing conditions that we're going to have, the venue, it wouldn't surprise me if they get those scores anyway without even finishing their overs.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Trent Bolt, the threat of Trent Bolt. Dale has picked him to be the leading wicket taker. Let's just look at some of his numbers. Strike early, and maybe this is going to be New Zealand's day or New Zealand's upset, the one that they've been hoping for. All eyes are on England. They are clear favourites in most minds going into this opening fixture for the World Cup. But 18 wickets in 13 innings at an average of under 12. Strike rate of 20 puts Trent Bolt right up there for the best bowling averages. Good list that. Starks, Siraj, numbers that would have been enhanced after the Asia Cup final, and Matt Henry. Bolt to be as effective in Indian conditions, Dale?
Yeah, still watch him play in the IPL, can swing the ball. I love the other thing about him is, you know, he does have those extended spells, but the one thing that I've always enjoyed about New Zealand is that they've got sometimes these strange field settings. They're not scared to experiment with third man being in, and they kind of go out of the traditional way of thinking, which makes batters have to play slightly differently. And I find that he gets wickets like that. He's not scared to get a guy caught at mid-wicket with a third man up, you know, or get a guy caught at square leg, two guys catching. That kind of thinking really helps him get wickets. And in ODI cricket, the best way to slow down a team that likes to score quickly is by taking wickets.
Yeah.
And he's a wicket taker, and New Zealand's mindset is wickets.
Yeah, you're right. I've seen that as well, because they often will put a deep mid-wicket out and put a deep third in. As a batter, I'm guessing you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to have third and fine back.
Yep.
And you've come ready. So what sort of difference does it make to a bowler first? Because then you think, oh, this is a big risk. Bowlers, fast bowlers usually want their third back. You know, they're attacking the fourth stump or outside off.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a buy-in from the bowler, and I think it started with Brendan McCullum. I certainly remember in 2015 we were playing in Auckland, small ground, no third man, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? I want a guy there, I want a fine leg, you know, the ball's going to be racing off there. But there was a buy-in from these guys. 4 years later, it's no surprise that Trent Bolt's name is high on that list and one of the leading wicket takers. You know, there is a mindset change, there's a thinking, a buy-in from all these players, and then an execution, obviously, that is required to do that. And then just masterful skill, obviously, he's a great bowler.
Do you expect their spinners to play a big part today, or is this about New Zealand's seam bowling attack? Because Sodhi and Santner, they surprise us every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, Santner for sure. I mean, you would want him to control that middle overs. He's a very canny bowler. We saw that even in Australia in that T20, where he slowed things down in a T20 game. Read the game, he reads the game really well. And on this surface, it's not just about bowling your variations, it's also about being smart about when to bowl those variations. And he has learnt that, having played so much of IPL cricket in India. So yes, the spinners will have to play a major role, especially against this batting lineup. And this batting lineup will come hard against the spinners. So you have a better chance of getting wickets, and I'm sure the spinners from New Zealand will look to do that.
Right, we're almost underway. Sachin Tendulkar has just walked out in the centre at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. He is the ambassador for this Cricket World Cup. My God, he's just the poster boy for World Cup cricket, isn't he? Steve Armisen made quite a bold prediction in that preview that we showed you, where he says maybe someone's going to break that record. Maybe it will be Virat Kohli. But it seems like all can be forgiven and forgotten in the last 4 years. We resume ODI cricket, World Cup cricket, as the MCC perhaps would now have it, from the last final at Lord's to this in Ahmedabad. We look back at one of the great games that will forever be etched in the memory of cricket fans. I think it's fair to call it one of the greatest ever international matches across formats, greatest ODI arguably, the tied game at Lord's, 241, which we don't even remember the scores anymore, do we? Nobody cares about the scores. Everyone remembers just the drama that came with the super over that was also tied and England winning it on the boundary countback. That'll never happen again. It's done. It'll never ever happen again. But is it fair to say that there would be some you could say some memories of that game still lingering here, even though it's been 4 years, or is that just more for us sitting outside?
It's probably just for us, but there are a couple of players that were in that dressing room, certainly from New Zealand, because they lost that game. They all want to redeem themselves and have some kind of redemption today. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, do you sense a New Zealand win today would just instill real belief here? Because sometimes you think New Zealand always punch above their weight, and they surprise us. But a win against England today is just the way to go.
Oh, it'll help their campaign massively, because this is the start of the World Cup, first game of the tournament. You would want to have that W under your name. So yes, both teams will be looking forward to that. But if New Zealand get that, then it certainly it changes the way the whole World Cup is going to look at New Zealand.
Out walks Johnny Bairstow with David Malan then. Trent Boult, we presume, will take the new ball in hand. The first ball of the 13th edition of the Men's Cricket World Cup is upon us. So let's get a prediction from Anil Kumble and Dale Steyn. I know it's hard sometimes and you're not seeing the surface, but have some fun here. 375, 425, 485. Who wants to go there? Come on, Anil Kumble.
I'll go to 345.
Ooh, that's good enough.
Yeah,
Dale.
I was going to go 330. Yeah.
Okay, 330 and 345. 331, excellent. 331 and 345. So we expect lots of runs in a World Cup that is touted to be won with plenty of runs. We look forward to your company at the end of the England innings on Maruti Suzuki Arena Presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday. So see you then, and make sure you download the mobile app if you haven't already. We've got some terrific coverage, text, video, and otherwise on the site. You'll get the fastest live scores and plenty more as the World Cup is set to get underway. We'll see you at the end of the England innings.
Stunning looks, then swift.